Kuhlmann. I work
Recording started.
Some of you might know me through the Rapid e-learning. Does anybody read the Rapid e-learning blog? None of you know me. No, but anyway, the Rapid e-learning blog, it's partially covered up here, but you can go there. It's I work for it. We make e-learning software, but the blog we do is pretty generic. We don't write about our software, and there's no ads or anything like that. And a lot of good PowerPoint tips and tricks and e-learning tips and tricks on there. And I give away a lot of free stuff too, so templates and anything I build for the demos I make available. If you ever have any questions, you can contact me through the blog. Email me. My Twitter address is blocked there, but it's just got to take it out from the last name. So what we're going to do here, and then anything, I'm going to share a lot of resources and links, and it's on this bit.ly address. And unfortunately with bit.ly you have to get it exactly right, so I'll share the address a little later as well. But it's ppt-not-stuffy. So don't worry about missing any of the resource links or anything like that, because that's all that stuff's on there. And then I've got some templates and all that as well. If you subscribe to the blog, there's an ebook and all that that goes with that as well, and you can always contact me. So what I want to do, okay, so that's our title here. Kind of share a little about my experience. I get to talk to a lot of people at conferences, and I kind of focus on the e-learning side of things. But typically, even on the e-learning side, even if I go to like these, Fortune 500 companies and talk to people, out of 100 people, about 95 of them are working by themselves. It's like a 1 or 2 person team. And then I'll say, well, do you have access to graphics designers? And the other thing on the PowerPoint side, a lot of e-learning people are using PowerPoint in their e-learning courses. And it's kind of an interesting dynamic because you hear a lot of bad stuff about PowerPoint. And it's funny, on the academic side, I usually find that people work projects because it's like everybody's using PowerPoint and they're just trying to find better ways to use it. On the corporate side, it's kind of like this shameful thing if you're using PowerPoint. So it's always like this interesting tension there. But I find that when I'm talking to people, most of them are using PowerPoint to flash e-learning tools, and they're working by themselves. They don't have the instructional design background. A lot of them don't have the graphic design background to build the types of things they need to build. They don't have access to Flash programmers or anything like that. I can sympathize with them because I like to share with people, because a lot of people will email me and say, well, where do you get all your tips from? I tell them, well, I used to work at a hospital that had no money. And so it was basically everything I did was in PowerPoint, and this was years ago when we were still doing everything on 35mm slides. So if I wanted graphics, I was using PowerPoint. If I wanted to make video back then, I'd shoot video, and then I would do the TV capture, I would do all my graphics in PowerPoint, and then output it to the VHS tape, and then bring it back in here and edit somewhere. So everything I learned, I kind of learned like MacGyver. You have no money, you have PowerPoint, and you just have to make do with what you have. And I think you tend to become more creative when you're forced to work with a lot of limitations. Now I do a lot of, there was a funny joke in there, but we'll go ahead and pass that. Is there a way to disable this?
That's what I'm trying to do.
Disable it? I think it's a little smaller. All right. Well, you hear all this negative about PowerPoint. I actually had somebody email me that. I don't know if you saw it a few months ago, that Washington Post article where they had the Pentagon thing, and they showed this real horrible diagram with things going in and out in the flow chart. And then she was saying, see, here's another good example of fast PowerPoint. I said, well, two things are wrong with that. First, the graphic wasn't created in PowerPoint. And the second problem was, PowerPoint's not the problem, it's the way that organization is using PowerPoint and debriefing and going through the content. But there's a lot of negative stuff about PowerPoint. So what I wanted to do today was talk a little about some of the really good things you can do with PowerPoint and show you some stuff that you might not be familiar with. Okay, thanks. All right, let's go back to it. It's probably not funny now. Sorry. Okay. So.
Oh, now we've killed you.
Let's see if okay, there it is. All right. Here's the problem with PowerPoint, right? It's easy to criticize PowerPoint. PowerPoint's like the thing everyone beats up on. No one wants to stand up and tell the presenter, hey, look at your PowerPoint. Your presentation's really bad, right? So what they do is they leave the presentation.
Oh, no, I'm doing it again.
They leave the presentation and they go, you know what? It's another bad PowerPoint presentation, right? And they're not complaining about the presenter.
You're going to kill me. It's all my fault.
All right.
I'm just going to take you out of this.
And this is really what should happen, right? You should have like something where you bring somebody in the room and you sit down with them and say, look, it's about right here where your presentation's not very good. So what I thought I'd do today is kind of help get rid of some of the crappy understanding of PowerPoint. All right, so the first thing is let's talk a little about PowerPoint. You know, the thing is, when you really break it down, and I've used most of the multimedia development platforms out there for e-learning, and they all basically have the same thing, which is a blank screen. So as long as you get away from the template structure that PowerPoint kind of you enter into, and when you open the application, it's just a blank screen. And when you look at it that way, you start to find that PowerPoint's actually a pretty powerful tool. So I'll give you a few examples here. So it's not just a presentation tool. It's kind of like a Swiss Army knife. Is anybody using PowerPoint 2010? Yeah, so PowerPoint 2010 has even that much more capability to it, and I'll show you some of that. So what I like, some of the things I like about PowerPoint is you've got the easy authoring, so you got a blank screen. If you've done any Flash development or anything like that, it's just, the learning curve's a lot steeper. When you come into PowerPoint, you can really, my kids jump into PowerPoint. They're always creating things in PowerPoint, and that's kind of one of the reasons people like it, is because the learning curve is really simple. You could just open it up. You might not have like all the skills you need, but you can open up and start working in it. Or you could be pretty advanced and do some pretty good things with it as well. I'll give an example. So for this example, Duarte, they a graphics design firm, Nancy Duarte, she wrote the book Slideology. They did a thing with PowerPoint. I'm going to show you the video, because when you look at the video, it looks like it was done in Flash. Unfortunately, these monitors always get kind of scrunched up when you're at conferences here. And when you get older, you need reading glasses. So here's the video. This video, and we'll just go through a few things here. The video was all created in PowerPoint. When you look at some of the image effects and the transitions in there, you wouldn't know it's a PowerPoint video. This is one of the nice things about PowerPoint 2010. It's actually a video creation tool, because you can craft whatever you want to on those slides, your animations, your transitions, all of that is retained, and then you can output that as a WMD file. So you can do some pretty neat things. And like some of the things here, the little bounce animation, all that's new in PowerPoint 2010. Yes.
You just made one statement that people actually said the output of this WMD file.
Right.
Does that run seamlessly? I mean, there's no jerks or.
Well, that's what you're watching here.
And that's the PowerPoint 10.
That's PowerPoint 2010. So one of the new features in PowerPoint 2010 is with video, and they've got a lot of neat things. So one is that you can take your presentation, like this is a combination of their animations and all that, but those transitions you see on the slides, that's some of the neat slide transitions. And then when you publish it, you just output it to WMD, and it produces the video for you. And it looks pretty nice. And then they've got some neat things in here. And again, I've got all this stuff online. You can look at it. This video itself is on YouTube. But you can insert video inside of your presentation. If you're familiar with PowerPoint 2007, you've got some of the graphic effects and reflection. Well, you can do all that to video as well. You could take shapes and film with video, some really nice things, and then you can run, like in this case, you can see video running inside of video. Well, a neat thing. On the Articulate side, if you're an Articulate user, what you do is you could customize your slide, and so you could create a slide that's like, say, we use 220 by whatever on the side panel. Well, you can customize your slide to have that dimension and actually create a video in PowerPoint and insert that into the slide panel. So a lot of neat things you can do. So it's just an example of the fact that PowerPoint's not just a presentation tool. It really is a pretty versatile application.
That's amazing, though.
Yeah, I mean,
because I tried to do that in the older versions, trying to tap into the annotation and some of the other
right.
things. It doesn't matter what you do, you just can't seem to get it to.
Right, well, a lot of the screencasting applications are just kind of making a video of PowerPoint. So the way they did in the frame rate that they capture, you're going to get
They're trying to run two processes
right.
simultaneously, and it's just your own CPU.
And so you get the jumping and stuff like that.
It's smooth.
This right here is a graphic. Now, this site here, PowerPoint Heaven, it's a PowerPoint MVP site. Sean Toe is one of the MVPs there. If you ever want to learn how to really max out what you can do in PowerPoint, that's the site to go to. And they all seem like they're all like 18 years old. But they build games with PowerPoint, pretty slick games. This right here, this whole illustration was built in PowerPoint. So again, it's not everybody, I couldn't do this. Not everybody can go in there and do that, but it just shows if you get away from the PowerPoint presentation thinking, you think of it as this blank canvas, and then you have a bunch of features and tools with the application, which shows that there are a lot of things you can do with the application. In this case, it's a great illustration tool. A lot of neat things you can do with it. So this is all PowerPoint, and there's a lot of examples. One of the nice things about this particular site is they have a lot of PowerPoint files you can download and then break them apart and kind of see how you did that. Yes?
Another question. I always had an issue with trying to capture the narration if you do the slides. Is this doing better than the old versions?
Yeah, the newer version of PowerPoint, the audio handles a little better. Although we're on camera, but I've had some issues with Windows 7 and 64-bit systems in PowerPoint for audio, but I think that's a driver issue with Windows 7. But, e-learning, if you build, e-learning courses, one of the neat things about this is years ago, I've been in the e-learning side of things for about 20 years. And, years ago, I was always at the whim of the programmers. So we were using Authorware back then. So you wanted to do something, and there was always a programmer, if you had a creative programmer who somebody who wanted to do something, they would jump on and do stuff, right? But if you had somebody who didn't want to do something, it's kind of like when you work with IT staff sometimes, they'll tell you why it doesn't work, right? So when somebody wants to do something when they don't. So a lot of times you'd run into these things with these programmers where you'd want to do things and they just wouldn't want to do them. So they'd tell you why you couldn't do it, and you were, you just didn't have any control over that unless you were the programmer. And so what's neat about a lot of the rapid authoring tools that use PowerPoint to Flash is it really enables people, I kind of think of it as like democratizing e-learning. It enables people who aren't programmers to build pretty decent e-learning products without having a programming background. And then, you could build really simple stuff or you can build some pretty complex stuff. It's just a matter of what you want to invest in that. But, again, we've got PowerPoint as a video creation tool, PowerPoint is an illustration tool, PowerPoint is a kind of a Flash substitute. Yes?
How would you safeguard against preparing your PowerPoint with pen and all these animations and so forth, and then you go to a conference without your computer having a flash drive, and their computer have an older software? What would you do?
Well, if you were running, that's one of the issues anyway with software being backwards compatible. But you can always, even if you didn't have PowerPoint, you can always download a PowerPoint viewer and run whatever presentations you have on there. You can always save your PowerPoint. If you have PowerPoint 2010, you can save it down to like PowerPoint 2003 and save it. You lose some of the effects that would be unique to PowerPoint 2010.
So, you know, in the 2010, I've seen unreliability when you inserted the videos into PowerPoint, and so you're saying that has gone away in 2010, as opposed to making your video into, making your PowerPoint into a video when you're inserting like video clips into 2010.
Yeah, PowerPoint 2010. I play around with it quite. I actually have a little PowerPoint side project as well as a blog. I can give you the address where I can go through 2010. It's kind of just to show stuff in there. I haven't run into any issues with that. And you've got some cropping and editing capabilities in PowerPoint 2010 as well.
And do you know if it's the same? I have 2010 for the Mac PowerPoint. Is it the same?
No, and I don't work for Microsoft, but from what I understand, the coding and everything for the PowerPoint versions between the Mac and Windows are completely two different.
I have Office 2010. I haven't installed it, frankly.
Yeah, I love PowerPoint 2010. So this is an example of a game. Again, if you go to the PowerPoint Heaven site, it's an interactive game. It's pretty cool. Download it, play around with it. It's pretty amazing when you play with some of those things. You think, I can't believe that was done in PowerPoint. And there's some pretty neat things in there. I won't go into all the things you could do, but it's a great site if you want to figure out how to stretch that. This is interesting. This company here, they self-published an Articulate book. And I was talking to them at a conference. They did everything, their whole layout, all of that in PowerPoint. They did it self-publishing instead of using the Adobe, what's that, InDesign that people use in publishing. They ended up building everything on PowerPoint. And you wouldn't know when you looked at the book, except for the cover. I think the cover was on PowerPoint. But the book itself looks just like any other book. So it's kind of neat that they could do it. And I could see where that would really be valuable if you didn't know InDesign, being able to go into PowerPoint because you have the freedom to move your objects and stuff around on the screen a lot easier than learning a new application. So there you go, a bunch of uses that most people don't think of when they're thinking of PowerPoint, or at least the ones who are complaining about PowerPoint. So when I talk to people, they say, well, that's really good, Tom, but what are the things I need to do to really become better at using PowerPoint? I kind of think there are like three key areas. So it's the visual communication, because PowerPoint really is just an application. So when you're using it to, whether you're building an e-learning course or doing a presentation or whatever it is, it's, how do you communicate using graphics and the visual design of whatever you're doing? Basic graphic design understanding, and then improving your technical skills. It's one of the things I like to do on the blog is I'll go find like an Illustrator demo, and then I'll say, well, let's see if I can replicate that in PowerPoint, and then I'll try to replicate something that was built in a much more complex tool. I can't always replicate. There's a big difference between Illustrator and PowerPoint, but you find you can actually do quite a bit that's comparable to, at least get a comparable output from PowerPoint when you're working that way. But one of the neat things about that is it's not so much, like one time I created this little envelope type thing, and then people say, well, I would never need that envelope. Why should I waste my time building this envelope? Well, you don't need to worry about the envelope, but if you do that, you're going to learn how to use the features and the tools. So I would say, improving your technical skills is probably the best way to get more out of PowerPoint. Most people typically use the very basic features in PowerPoint. They don't really do much more outside of that. So when you talk about the visual communication, it really is about figuring out how to take your ideas and representing them visually. This was, I thought, pretty. They actually have some. It's the marketing part of their site. They actually have some pretty interesting information on there. So if you go to that website, you can kind of look at how they talk through some of that. But it's really about creating meaning on what you put on the screen. Years ago when I did video work, our instructor would say, "There's nothing in that frame or there should be nothing in the video in that frame that you didn't intend to be there, because everything you put on there has some sort of meaning. You might not intend that meaning, but people see it, and they're going to get some meaning out of it. And it's the same thing with whatever you put on your slides, whether you're building a presentation or a course or graphics or whatever. Everything you put on there is something you placed on there to help contribute to the message that you want to convey. Otherwise, people interpret whatever you have on there whatever way you want to. Muslim video program. Every Friday we kind of show our little simple projects. It's always funny because you were never supposed to reveal what your intention was. You show the thing, and then you have people give their feedback, come out the focus group. It was always interesting to hear what people got out of what you showed them that you didn't intend for them to get. So it's really an important thing to consider that when you put something on the screen, you might not intend it, but it does communicate. There's an exercise we do. We have like a mind mapping exercise that kind of help people figure out how to create the right look and feel for the courses. And you know, one of the examples we use is if you think about designing a Western poster, like right now, if you kind of try to mentally picture that, what would a Western movie poster look like? I mean, what would you think of when you think of a Western movie poster?
Horses.
So horses, John Wayne, Jake Honda. Yeah, so you kind of got, everybody's already got like a mental picture. So if I wanted to convey, if I wanted to do something out of this Western, making an advertising Western movie, there are already things I can do to visually communicate and get you connected to that information before I even start sharing the information. And that's part of that, the visual communication process. And the other thing is the graphic design. You know, this is a good example from Presentation Zen. I don't know if anybody go to the Presentation Zen site? It's a really good site, and he's actually got a couple of good books too. And he goes through this process of teaching people how to communicate better visually. But this is a neat example because the first gender issues slide kind of looks like a typical PowerPoint type slide, right? If you ask people, how was that created, they probably tell you PowerPoint. If you ask them how the other one was created, they might say Photoshop or something else. And but it's really just the same information. It's just the way it's structured, and it's got a much more impactful way of communicating to you. And it's just employing some basic graphic design concepts. Contrast, the layout of elements on the screen. The technical skill, it's kind of neat that even the Albert Einstein, I kind of wanted to show that in the other conference session I did. But the Albert Einstein image there, I actually used the filters, there's some graphic filters in PowerPoint 2010, kind of show that you can even dress up your images in a different way. But you want to play around with PowerPoint, kind of play around like those Illustrator type tutorials and some of the features so you become more fluent in using the tools. And I think the more you're able to do that, the broader your understandings of what you can do when you start to work on your projects at the get-go. A lot of times people just don't know that you can do these things, and then they just kind of, you only work with what you know you can do, right? So how can I learn? There's some good books out there. Again, I've got that link, it's got all this stuff on there. Slideology is a good book. Has anybody got Slideology? Yeah, it's a good book. She does a great job going through some basic graphic design concepts. And then there's the Beyond Bullet Points, Cliff Atkins' book. I like it because he does a great job helping you distill your message. It works great for e-learning if you're doing e-learning work, but structured more around presentations. But he kind of has it wrapped around kind of like a 3-act play, and then kind of walks you through. It's kind of neat. It's got worksheets and stuff. You can do like a 5-minute, 15, I think 45-minute type structure. The non-designer's design book, which I highly recommend to people because it goes through the basic graphic design concepts. There's the CRAFT acronym, or CART if you're a fisherman, or if you have little kids. My wife doesn't like to hear the CRAFT, so I have to use CART. But it's the contrast, so very, what? CART. I guess, yeah. Switch around, especially in Palo Alto, right? Anyway, but you've got the contrast, so learning to create contrasting elements, whether it's contrasting fonts or the width of your fonts or colors or sizes, repetition, learning to repeat elements on the screen, alignment, how things are aligned, and then proximity, how how the relationships are formed and how you structure the screen. So basic design, unfortunately the non-designer design book is a little old. It's kind of more web-based, but it's still got very good, solid design principles in it that you're going to be able to use. And then the presentation Zen books are good as well. I haven't read his new one, but I think his new one's a little more practical. Has anybody read his new presentation? Well, then it's really good. Well, I've heard that it's a much more practical approach to some of these ideas. A good website, and again, these are the Microsoft MVP websites. If you want to learn more about PowerPoint, the Microsoft MVP website. Each MVP, there's not many I can think of that don't have a pretty strong web presence, and they all have all sorts of tutorials and tips and tricks there, and most of them you can connect with, which is kind of cool. You know, years ago, for all the internet stuff, you didn't have that availability, but now you can, they all have blogs. You can go and connect with them and ask them questions and get some help. My blog, I think, is a good website if you want to learn more about PowerPoint. There's a lot of tips and tricks in there. And then we've actually been doing a lot of stuff in Screener, which is like a free screencasting tool. So we'll do these little Screener tutorials, and we've cataloged the ones we've done, for our software and with PowerPoint. There's probably about 700, 800 tutorials now. So, and they're little, 1 to 4 or 5 minute tutorials. What's neat about it is we got a lot of really creative people in our community who do some really neat tutorials, like Stephanie. Yeah.
The screener, is that screener.com, and then you're searching through all those videos? Are they related to screencast?
Well, if you go to, let me see here. It's on that link. But if you go to the articulate.com website in the community, there's on the right-hand side it'll say community tutorials, and then we've got them. There's a PowerPoint section. The good news is, sometime soon, we're revamping our community. And one of the things that we're doing is I've given away so much free stuff that a lot of times I get emails. I got about 70,000 readers now, and I get about 2,000 emails a week for asking for help on things, and I can't keep up with it, and then a lot of times I can't find the stuff I gave away. But it doesn't have to stop. We need to make it easier. If I can't find it, the people reading the blog can't find it. So we're actually revamping our community. So sometime soon, maybe in the next couple of weeks or so, we'll be revamping our, is anybody tweeting this? Well, we'll be revamping our community. It'll be out there, and there'll be a whole download section, and there's hundreds, maybe thousands of stuff that you can download for free from it. But there's all the PowerPoint templates and assets and things that we've created are all available through that. So that'll be a little easier. And then we've also cataloged all those tutorials as well. But if you go to the Articulate site, we've done it. You can contact me through the blog, and I can get you all those links as well. I think it was a couple of weeks ago I did a blog post on all these PowerPoint resources, and I put the names of a lot of people you should follow in Screener that do really good tutorials. So I did, like on the PowerPoint 2010, it's kind of as a side project, trying to get my kids to jump into that, so hopefully that'll be something that pays for the college somewhere down the road. But I've been starting to go through all these PowerPoint 2010 things. So I've got about, on the Screener side, probably about 90 PowerPoint 2010 tutorials on there. And I try to make them a minute or less. So they're just real quick through there.
Yeah, those are the most useful, the shorter, just simple things you can go from there.
Right, and it's just, what I want to do is have all the basic features covered and then go through and kind of start to show how to do things with the features. But a lot of resources, and again, all that stuff's on that link. The tutorials we talked about. Screener is really nice if you're not using Screener. It's free, especially in an academic environment where a lot of things you don't have the money to do stuff. It's a free screencasting tool. A lot of teachers use it because essentially you're just going to record your screen. There's a 5-minute limit on it right now for the free version, and then you can embed it in Twitter and all that other stuff. So it's pretty nice if you're not familiar with it. You'll never improve. I was thinking at the airport I should have changed the graphic down in San Francisco. You'll never improve without practice. You know, I get people that one of the things that they email me all the time, and they'll say, well, I can't do this, I can't do that. I say, well, did you try this? No. Did you try that? No. You're not going to get good at anything if you don't practice doing that. You know, if you want to be a good football player, you've got to practice. If you want to be a good piano player, you've got to practice. If you want to be good at using PowerPoint, you've got to practice, right? You've got to learn how to use it. You've got to practice using it. Unfortunately, practice isn't helping that much this year. Use the resources available to you. It's like I was saying earlier, it's amazing what's available to you online. You know, years ago, you couldn't contact somebody like me. You would hardly be lucky if you could write a letter to me. But now, you know, you can email me and I can help you out. And there's all sorts of consultants and experts online that you have access to that you've never had access to before. And all sorts of free resources. You know, YouTube probably has thousands of PowerPoint type tutorials. I mean, there's the screener tutorials and whatever else, all those MVP sites and all of that. The books, there's all sorts of free stuff out there, and then other really good resources. So I take advantage of the resources that are available to you. Like a lot of the tutorials that I do, my goal isn't so much that you just take the templates I give away, which I don't mind giving away the templates. It's really that you can break them apart and kind of figure out how that was done and then learn to do that yourself. So if I have a little tutorial in there, my goal is to try to get you to figure out how to do that for yourself so that you can improve your skills. Another good thing is to go to places like SlideShare. You know, they just had that contest a few weeks ago for the best presentations. They're not all done in PowerPoint. Some of them are probably done in other tools. But they're good. There are a lot of great examples of presentations on there. It's a good way to get to see how people are using the graphics. If you find something you like, try to replicate it, see how they did that, and kind of look at some of the messaging that they have in there. There's a lot of neat resources, a lot of really neat presentations on there. Give you some ideas about how to get better. Again, this is that illustrated tutorial, so it was done initially in PowerPoint. What's interesting, I emailed the guy the other day, we were talking, and he was impressed that it actually took fewer steps in PowerPoint to create this than it did in Illustrator. But when you look at it, it's really just, all I did was I created the one shape and filled it, and then I just changed them out, changed the fill on there, and then just added these. I mean, it's really just a few shapes, and then this was all using the format painter, was just applying the same thing and rotating things around. So this only took about 2 or 3 minutes to pull that together. And again, whether or not you can use the TV is one thing, but going in there and practicing to use it, practicing how to create that is going to show you how to use the tool out there, especially when you have to use the Bezier tool and try to figure out how to do the curves and things like that. Look for inspiration. Here's a free template that I gave away. One of the challenges a lot of people I run into have is they don't have the graphic design background. And so they're like, well, I don't know what to do. It's like, well, just go find a website that you like. I do this all the time. If I find something I think looks interesting, could be something I could use in a course, I just snag it and capture it and keep it in like an ideas folder. And then when I want some inspiration for like a slide layout or something like that, I'll go back and look at it. Sometimes it's the color, sometimes it's the layout. In this case, this was Flock. This was probably a couple of years ago. Flock had an interesting, I thought it was kind of an interesting layout, and I kind of like the colors and stuff. I thought, that structure could work in an e-learning course. So then I kind of mocked it up in PowerPoint, and then you can get the template here for free from the blog. But the thing is, going through this kind of helps me learn to do the gradings in PowerPoint. Kind of makes me think about layout and structure. If I was going to use this, even if it wasn't an e-learning course that I was going to publish with PowerPoint, the Flash tool, it's going to teach me how to work with the master files, how to use some of the graphics features, how to work with the hyperlinking and things like that. So even if you don't need to use this for e-learning, going in there and learning how to do is going to teach you how to use PowerPoint. Yeah.
So it's like for this example, this is just a blank background sample that you found, and you develop your own. Then I'm just thinking copyright, and you know.
Well, there's no copyright because you're not stealing their stuff, right? So what I did is this is the website, and then I created my own using theirs as inspiration. You can change the colors or do whatever you want to. Matter of fact, when I do these things, I try to change them up a little. I always email the people. If I use their site, like this Ryan Hutton, the guy who did the TV, I'll email them and say, hey, here's what I'm doing if I use their website. And they all seem to enjoy that because they're always surprised you can do anything in PowerPoint. So that's super. Yeah.
I used one of Tom's templates and liked it better with it thinking, and they're all just objects. You know, so you can change them and color them, and in, you know, PowerPoint there's all sorts of designs, colors, and, you know, things you can do. And one of the newest things that I learned was, you know, you mess around with them and keeping one file that's a graphics file so you can mess with it. And then taking, because there's lots of objects on that page, taking a whole picture of, you can save it as a picture and then load that onto new slides. So then you create a really smaller file. So you've got this one file that you can play with what it gives you, and once you finally decide what you want, then you can save this picture. So it's a smaller file, and you know, you just activate.
All right, so we can skip over the next 10 slides.
Sorry. It was really good experience. It was a really good experience.
One thing I was going to ask you about, the only reason why is because I just had to deal with this, and that's how to make our video that now runs on iPods and iPads and all that using the HTML5 tag, fallback to Flash. Are you doing those the same way where you're going to have, you know, like I know your stuff now makes Flash that will play on the website. Is your company going to go forward and make it so that that will also play on, say, an iPad or an iPhone?
We've got some things planned I can't talk in detail about. I'll tell you this much for anybody's doing. Is anybody an articulate user? And we give an academic discount. So you're just letting you know. But we're working on some things. You know, it's interesting, I'm not a programmer, but I was talking to one of our developers. One of the challenges with the HTML5 thing is from the software development is you've got multiple, it's not just like, well, it's not just Flash, there's a player, and everything's built around the player. In HTML5, there's no real player, but it's always, you know, you always at the whims of the browsers, not all the browsers work the same, and then you're also at the whim of the actual device and how the device handles that as well. But we're working on some things. We're a for-profit enterprise, so where the money's at is where the company's going to be. I'll tell people who aren't that familiar with our company, even though everything we do is Windows-based, all of the key decision makers in our company, except for me, are Mac enthusiasts. I'm not an anti-Mac person, but they're all like, they were the ones standing in line for the iPad and all that stuff. So they use Macs. A lot of us, I think most of the people on our company use Macs. So if the market's there, then we'll be there, and with the iOS stuff, you know, it's just a matter of the market. And you know, there's a practical element to it.
The simple thing is I just use a player called the JW Player, which is free, so essentially what it is that the text, whether it's running an iPad or an iPhone, and if it's not, then it automatically falls back to the Flash, which is what yours does, and it plays in all the browsers, so it'll play with both.
Right, and we're, like I said, we're looking at some stuff. I just can't talk about it in detail, but you know, it's always about money, you know, and the market. Some other things that are really good for learning is, and this is one of my pet peeves, is in at least in the e-learning site, and it might not be this way in the education site, but it's like there's a rule. You know, if somebody publishes a book like the Ruth Clark's book on the science of instruction, or the e-learning and science of instruction, she talks about cognitive code and all that stuff. All of a sudden, it's like this becomes these rules. You have these rules, and then everything gets entrenched in these rules, and then it becomes like one way that you can do things. And as soon as you start to deviate from this one way, everybody kind of pounces on. It's like the old monkey they experiment with the monkeys and the bananas. They ever do that where they squirt them with water? It might not even be a real experiment. It's a good story where they pick a bunch of monkeys and they put them in a room with these bananas and they started climbing on the thing to get these bananas. And they would squirt them with water, and then they eventually learn not to go after the bananas. And they'd take one monkey after the new one in, and then the new monkeys sitting around going, all right, bananas. You know, they jump up there, and all the other monkeys would start to pounce on them. And eventually, they got all the original monkeys out of there, and they had a group of monkeys that wouldn't go to the bananas because all these other monkeys pounced on them. And a lot of times, it's how the e-learning industry is. We create these real steadfast rules. As soon as somebody wants to do something different, everybody pounces on them. But I like to say, you know, look at these different things. These are 3 good or 4 good examples of different presentation styles. So, classic style, and these are fascinating if you've ever seen them. They're just black screens with white text, but it's really interesting the way he goes through his content, and they keep you looking at the content, you know, while he's talking. There's nothing on there but this. This is his presentation. But it's a different style than something Seth Godin might do. You know, Seth Godin has a style that's very unique to the way he does things. Or this was an interesting one. One of the guru submissions a few years ago, this lady did kind of a meditation thing that was, again, a different style than you might normally see in e-learning. And then the TED videos, I'd love to go see those. Now, they don't usually show the presentations of them, but they're good inspiration to kind of help you think through how they're calculating a person's attention. I was reading something by one of the people from the TED, maybe a couple weeks ago, where he was talking about how, like, have you ever seen the TED video with the lady who had the stroke and she's got that human brain on stage and all that? But she practiced for some 9 months to deliver this presentation. Now, you might not know that, right, when you're watching the presentation, but there are some fascinating presentations on there. So even if they're not showing slides, it's kind of still neat to be inspired by how they're crafting your message, to gain that exposure to the way people are doing things and different things, and that'll kind of broaden your perspective. The foundational PowerPoint skills. The first one is to always start with a blank slide. The other one is I tell people slide count's irrelevant because it really depends on how you structure your presentation. You could have somebody, I've seen presentations where people will have 500 slides and the slides are just sticking down like that, and then you have a presentation where somebody's got 5 slides and they might talk for an hour on the 5 slides. So slide count's irrelevant. It's really about how you structure the content. I like to think of it less about the linear structure of your slides and more as layers. You've got layers of information. So you can have 10 slides that essentially all look the same, but little pieces of information are changing. There could be 10 slides, or it could be one slide where you have 10 animations. So it doesn't really matter what the slide count is at that point, other than your actual size of the file. Hyperlinking. You learn hyperlinking in PowerPoint. It's pretty simple, but that's one of those things that once you start to get you able to jump around your presentation or your content, or have the people who are doing it if you're using it as an e-learning product, it allows you to add some interactivity to that. Animation, really learn how to use the animation tools in PowerPoint, and then the master slides. If you're working in PowerPoint and does anybody do PowerPoint to Flash type e-learning? Well, anyway, if you're working, even if you did that, it saves a lot of your publishing time. But on the master slides, I usually tell people if you're repeating data from starting at 3, maybe 5 slides, and it's starting to be repeated, take that, move it to your master, and then just assign it. You can have multiple masters. You can have 80 masters if you want to. But if you have slides that have repeated data, just go ahead and put that on the master slide versus having all these slides. Most people I work with, they'll have like a slide, they work on it, and then they duplicate it, and then they work on that, and they duplicate it, and they work on that, and they duplicate it. They end up having 30 slides, and essentially 80% of the content on all 30 slides is the same. So just put that on the master slide, and then it's a lot easier when you have to do edits, especially if you have to do edits 2 or 3 months later. If you have to do edits the next day, it's not as bad. If you have to do edits, you go back, and then you've got 80 slides with all this stuff you've got to work on. It's a real hassle. The nice thing in PowerPoint 2007 is the layers control. Who's using PowerPoint 2007? Okay, so probably about half of you, and then a couple are using 2010. The 2007, one of the hassles of being efficient in PowerPoint in the older versions, there's a whole layer, and you didn't have real good control of the layers. In PowerPoint 2007 and 10, you do have control of the layers. So you can, as you can see here, you can name the layers, you can shuffle them up and down, you can hide them, do all that stuff. It's kind of nice because you can build some content out and kind of use it as a prototype. And like she was saying earlier, you could build your content and then save it as a graphic file and bring it back in. You don't want to delete your original, but if you wanted to, you could just hide it so it's not visible. It's always there for you to do some edits and bring it back in as a graphic. But when you work with a single graphic, it's a little bit easier on your system and less apt to have glitches and stuff. Graphics, you know, this is one of the big things. It's always an eye-opener, even for people who've been doing this stuff for a year. A lot of the PowerPoint clip art and graphics, if you're a graphic designer, there's a lot of free graphics that Microsoft makes available to you. You can download them, ungroup them, manipulate them, do whatever you want to. I've got clip art characters, I've got your body parts taken apart, and I can swap them out in your head. So then if I want to have one character in different scenes, then I can have that same character, but just using different bodies and swap the heads out or the, you know, the blouse or something like that. And then I've got the person sitting in the desk or the person standing or whatever. It's really easy to do that. And you just save them as you're going through that, and now you'll find after, you know, a few months, you do a lot of these, after a few months you might have 50 or 60 really cool character packs that you can work with. And then this is that saving as a graphic, so you can right-click on an object that you create in PowerPoint, just save it as a picture. Save it as a PNG, and that'll preserve the transparency. And swap images. This is another nice feature of 2007. Is if you, in the past, if you created something in PowerPoint and had animations and all of that, and you wanted to, say you had a horse and the horse was animated was jumping over or something, and then the client said, well, you know, we want to switch to cows. Cows are the rage. So you got to switch it to cows. You have to break all the animation out and then rebuild it. But now in PowerPoint 2007 and higher, you can just right-click and swap the graphic, and all the animations and everything are retained. What's nice about this, you can pre-build a lot of animated elements and then just, you know, use them to swap out. All right, I'm going to be done here in 10 seconds. My PowerPoint 2010 features, this is from a different presentation, but you can get those on, I've got that link, so let me go back to the beginning here. I've got this link here, and it's got all of the resources, links to tutorials or whatever. You can email me if you have any questions. If you have any PowerPoint questions, you don't even use our tools. If you have any PowerPoint questions or any questions about anything with graphics or video or whatever, feel free to email me. If I can't help you, I'll at least try to get you going in the right direction. And then the blog, of course, if you subscribe to that, my kids will be happy. Any questions before we wrap it up? All right, well, you guys have a great day.
You make your money.
Hmm?